You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello. All right, today my guest is Erica Drewry. She is a dietitian dedicated to teaching you how to worry less about food and be more present when things that matter. With over 10 years of experience, Erica believes your relationship with food is a foundation for discovering your own version of well-being and health. Additionally, she is a certified intuitive eating counselor and eating disorder dietitian supervisor. Beyond working with clients, she loves to connect and interact with her community on Instagram at Align Nutrition and her podcast, the Align Nutrition Podcast. Okay. So here we are again with food, body, and nutrition. I'm just going to give the little reminders that the first conversation with Dr. Connaughton was all about my rage with understanding diet culture for the first time. Then I talked to Caitlin, and I go deep into my childhood and discover some of my own uncomfortable thoughts, feelings, and early learnings on food and body image. Next, I talked with Uime, who gives me the push to do the work, to read the books, and to really take this seriously. And now today with Erica, we get into the daily grind of it. Erica gives a fantastic amount of real-life examples of how to have nutrition align with your daily life. She gives us an idea of what it's like to work with a dietitian. She shares her personal story with how she's come to do the work she does today, and of course, more. Stay tuned after the show to see where I'm at with this journey. But for now, here's Erica. Hey, Erica, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you for having me. So glad to be here.
This is such a big topic for me. I've been dipping my toe in. I bought the intuitive eating books. I'm a chapter in, and basically get ready for what's probably going to feel like a food therapy session with me.
Bring it on.
All right. So aligned nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What does it mean to you? And why should we care about it?
When I worked with somebody on coming up with a name for my practice, something that I would often say to clients is nutrition that is aligned with your life. And what I mean by that is a lot of the women and the men that I've worked with, there's this element of nutrition not fitting into life. I shouldn't have eaten that, or oh my gosh, my vacation messed up my diet plan, or oh, if I just wouldn't eat these carbs when I go out, oh, if I just wouldn't be able to, if I can't keep candy in the house. There's all these things where really what matters to us, what's important to us, our well-being, our relationships, our lives, and feeling like nutrition doesn't fit in because we have these rigidities, we have these rules around eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to really bring that together because when I'm working with people, it's finding, how does nutrition fit into you? With your daily schedule, like when does it make sense for you to eat? What foods sustain you? What foods taste good to you? What foods nourish you until your next meeting? So it's kind of backwards, and that's where the aligned nutrition with our lives comes in.
Yeah. I have to say, I just even hearing that description as someone who's not aligned with her nutrition currently,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of why I'm not is that it sounds like more work than I feel like I can add to my plate right now.
Mm, absolutely. Because you're trying to change a paradigm. Like, I always think about, like when we think about these like rules and these external pressures on eating, they're external. And then really intuitive eating or trying to find nutrition that sort of, and I'm not saying you don't ever need to think, oh, what am I going to buy at the grocery this week, or what snacks will I have on hand? Like, there's still thought and care and consideration that goes into what we're eating, but it's just more aligned with your body. You're listening to yourself, you're figuring out what food sustain you, what that looks like. And so I think it's this message of like external, I should eat that, I shouldn't eat this,
Hmm.
and trying to make it more internal, because then it's like it's flowing from you. So I think the idea of trying to, when you're changing the paradigm, you're going, how do I even know what I need to eat?
Yeah.
How do I know even how often I need to eat? What does that even look like? That can feel daunting.
Hmm.
But down the line, you know that exactly. Like almost like let's say that almost like if you had a uniform when you were getting ready for work versus having a huge walk-in closet that are a million different sizes and a million different clothes, and you can just go in and try to pick out whatever, and you're trying to put an outfit together. I feel like food can go the same way, where you're like, once I figure out kind of what my body expects of me, what kind of foods I like, how my style, how what I eat will ebb and flow throughout the year, what's called in different situations, then it's easy to just go ahead and put on your uniform, what you're used to wearing, and like how to put it together versus like just kind of this chaos of I should wear this because this color looks good on me, or I should wear this because this is what I need to do. I know it's kind of interesting to take it like with the outfit analogy, but just trying to demonstrate that we do get to know ourselves and we get to know our bodies and our preferences. So it does eventually feel like second nature. And we could argue that that's portable, that can go with you anywhere. You don't need to worry about what they're going to be serving at the party, or what you will eat on vacation, or what you will do on a road trip. It's just you figure out that information.
I do. And I only know it because I wore a uniform for high school. So, as it relates to food, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I can imagine the situation because, yeah, I just got up and I put my skirt and my shirt on. Like, that was it. And it was really easy and really comfortable and really simple. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. It sounds really good. Oh,
Inspirational at the
yes,
moment.
yes. Okay. So how did you get into this work? What's your story with food?
Yes, so it takes one to know one.
Mm,
And for me, when I was studying nutrition in college, I always loved science. I always wanted to help people. And I thought it was cool. I thought, okay, food can enhance the quality of our lives. And so then when I was studying nutrition, the perfectionist in me started to hear all of these messages, much like if you feel like you've tried every diet on the planet, or oh, I thought coffee was good for you, now it's bad for you. What? I don't understand. All of these things. And so I was being inundated with these messages in nutrition school. And okay, in order for me to be a good dietitian, I need to embody this perfect eating style.
mm.
And obviously, we know how this ends. And I had like a list of like 10 foods that I felt comfortable eating and without feeling guilty about it. I was just feeling so stressed about food all of the time.
Mhm.
And I was studying to take my board exam to become a dietitian, and I couldn't do it. If this is what learning about nutrition does, why would I want to teach anyone about nutrition? Because all it does is result in stress, chaos. I should eat this, I shouldn't eat that, guilt, constant thoughts of food. And so basically, I started these endless Google searches and somehow landed on intuitive eating as a topic. And I read the book and it changed my life. I thought, okay, this approach to nutrition makes sense to me. And it was that kind of approach that I was describing to you, where you're getting in touch with what does your body need? You have a neutrality, this idea that all foods have moral neutrality. They may not
Mm,
be created equally. All food serves different purposes, but
mhm.
morally, we are not bad for eating certain foods. We are not good for eating certain foods. We are not good people for eating certain foods. And so intuitive eating essentially changed how I viewed everything I had learned about nutrition. And I found myself almost going backwards. And so, like, an example would be in food in school when I learned about nutrition, I would have heard the message that whole grains are good for us. So I would have internalized that to mean that only eating whole grains, that's the only thing that you eat. And anything that is not a whole grain is bad for you and never eat it.
Mm.
And so then as I'm looking through the lens of intuitive eating, I can see, okay, whole grain bread. So we value whole grains because they have B vitamins, they have fiber, they can help sustain us and keep us full for longer. Fiber is good for digestion, cancer prevention, our gut microbiome, etc. But in the big picture of things, we also get fiber from fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, beans, other plant-based foods. So why does it matter if I'm always every single day choosing whole grains exclusively? If we zoom out, it's like if the
Mm.
goal is to get enough fiber and enough carbohydrate, then why did I need to internalize that message so rigidly? And so
Mm.
I found myself going back to nutrition, almost going back to school in my mind through this new lens of intuitive eating. And that's really how I formed how I practice today. And I went into private practice, which means that I started working with clients individually, just me and them, getting referrals from doctors, therapists, people who would just learn about me. And today I really work exclusively with people with eating disorders, disordered eating, people who've dieted a lot, really anyone who feels like their relationship to food in their body is just not at peace.
Mm.
And they want to have that congruency. And it's pretty cool. I mean, I'm so grateful that my job is one that I can help people that that were me.
Yeah.
Just the idea that I can take something that was so negative and so stressful to me in my life and be able to turn that into a career where I can exponentially affect other people and their lives. Um, I'm glad that I went down that path, I guess.
Yeah. So talking about you touched on so many things. I'm like taking notes like crazy, but the one thing that's really just screaming at me is considering what you learned in school about nutrition. What's lacking from the education? What would you implement in the education to better make like provide a better program for someone who wants to get in this field?
Yeah, well, and it's cool because I have interns reach out to me, I have dietetic students reach out to me, and that intuitive eating and health at every size, which were things that were greatly missing from my education. We got a lot of the science background and then nutrition metabolism. How does that flow out to actual foods? We learn about the body, we learn about medication, we learn what it means to work in a community and work with other healthcare providers. And we learn what's called medical nutrition therapy, where it's these therapeutic diets can help with existing medical conditions or health prevention. So if we add in the intuitive eating and the health at every size, then I like to think I would have been good to go and I would have had a
Mm.
more well rounded education. But I don't know if I would because it was both 50% of what I was hearing or not hearing specifically with intuitive eating and the health at every size. But the other 50% was the message, the way that I was internalizing that message from my own
Mm.
personal quest to learn how to eat perfectly and be this whatever vision of health I thought I was going to be. And
Mm-hmm.
be thin and all of those things that I thought were valuable. So I do think if I had learned about health at every size and intuitive eating, perhaps it would have been different. But I'm really encouraged by the fact that it is in programs now. Not all programs. I think we have a ways to go. Even some eating disorder prevention stuff. I think a lot of times people think, oh, food doesn't harm. Let's have a fifth grader count calories in MyFitnessPal for health class. And we don't realize that there's a lot of people who genetically, personality characteristics, environmental, they can develop an eating disorder, which is the second most deadly mental illness that exists. And it's very costly and difficult to treat. It's obviously miserable for those people that are suffering with them. So I do wish there was a bit more in teaching dietitians on how to screen for eating disorders, which may be
Mm-hmm.
present in some programs and some not. Um, but
That
yeah,
that's like a little bit mind blowing to me that it wouldn't be in every program. I
yeah,
mean, it's like hello. I don't
right,
I don't even know
right.
what else to say about that. That is like that's the big one.
I
You
know
know,
it seems so foundational, right? It's
it does. It really does.
And I think because intuitive eating is backed by over 90 studies and counting. And so I think the way our professional association approaches things, it's like the more and more research and evidence it starts to come to the forefront over time as an approach. Because intuitive eating was created in 95. And just in the last few years, there have been more presentations about it at some of our bigger conferences. And I think a lot of people were saying what you were like, where have we been this whole time? And I think
Yeah.
fortunately, the creators, Elsie Rush and Evelyn Tribole, do value research. And so we're able to say, hey, not only are we seeing this with our clients and our patients, but there's also validated research studies that are backing this method.
Yeah. My brain is like firing off in so many directions, and quite honestly it could be because I had a venti this morning that I don't normally have, but I I'm thinking about all of this and how all of this is kind of coming to the culture and our society as a whole. Like, you being a student who's interested, even if you had heard it at that time in your life, you might not have really heard it. And you know, the fact that intuitive eating exists is a wonderful thing, but it exists because we've gotten so far removed from it. It like the way I understand intuitive eating so far,
Mhm.
I'm one chapter. I'm 100 pages into this book, okay? But and I've interviewed a few other guests on this, but the way I understand it so far is like you're almost taking your mindset and your tuning inward and you're listening to your body, and you're kind of the the phrase that's coming to mind is like we're just getting back to basics. And just as a whole, we've gotten so far that there has to be this label on what should be instinctual.
Mhm. You
It's
nailed
messed
it.
up.
Yeah,
It's messed up. I don't like it.
it,
It makes
it
me angry.
100%. It really does. And I think a lot of people experience that anger that you are when you first learn about it, because you think, oh my gosh, so wait, when I was a toddler or I was in kindergarten and I ate half of a cucumber and half of a cookie and I didn't know there was a difference between the two. I just so innocently was listening to my body. And then
Mm-hmm.
that was taken from you. And then you have to work hard to get back to that foundation. It is.
Yeah.
And so many people spend, so much money, so many years suffering, so much time spent feeling guilty. Oh my gosh, when I was at my sister's wedding, I didn't even have cake because I wasn't, I was in a carb sparing diet of some sort at that point. There's grief there. There's anger there. As
Yeah.
how has that been for you? Have you had any memories that have come through that really surface where you think, "Oh my gosh."
Yeah, actually, it was in a conversation with Caitlin Parsons. I don't know if you're familiar with her.
I
Yeah,
love
I know.
Caitlin. She's amazing.
Yeah, no one can see you, but you just put your hand over your heart. Like, she's just such a lovely human being. And in talking to her, I recalled being a gymnast under 10 years old, under 8 years old, and we would train for so many hours that we would have to eat lunch at the gym, or excuse me, dinner at the gym. And my mom was very health conscious. She sent me with carrot sticks and all the things. And I was very young, and I remember looking around and going, is everyone finishing everything that's in their cooler? Or should I leave some? Or just what's. I have to say, so I know some of it was about body image because, you're in a leotard and you're with older girls, and some of it was just wanting to like be cool and fit in and do what the other kids were doing, and the older girls especially. But we're sitting there in our leotards eating dinner. And
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
and you're watching your stomach fill up, you're watching your legs when you sit down spread out, you're constantly adjusting the straps on your leotard to cover the little bit of chunk that everyone has between their arm and their armpit.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you're like, is 4 carrot sticks too much, or should I have all 6? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And it's you're describing that, where we learn from a young age to start look outside of ourselves and what's
Yes.
everyone else doing? Is this the right thing to do? And then you also highlight an important point of that self-consciousness that we feel in our body can be a risk factor for food going off the tracks, because that discomfort that we feel, are we going to do something about it with food? And so, that kind of here's how I'm feeling in my body, how much should I eat? That message can, when that is in play, you just, it's hard to get out of that place. And that's where I
Yeah.
think for even now, hey, learning about intuitive eating, why is this radical? It seems like this should be the natural response,
Yeah.
but then you trace back and go, well, wait a minute, from a long time ago, I was looking at these external messages. I wasn't asking myself, how full I am. In fact, it sounds like it was kind of the opposite of I need to stay small enough or only so full enough here in this, and that's where like when you look at this stuff, it's like biological, genetic, personality characteristic, environmental, obviously
Mm-hmm.
any like appearance based sports or careers, things like that. I grew up dancing, so I get exactly what you're talking about. And then,
Mm-hmm.
then we have these pieces of, other things that can happen in our lives. There might be, um, 10 people on a gymnastics team and a coach that maybe might be making some remarks about people's bodies, and only one person, develops that self-consciousness. And it's like, well, why did they? But it
Mm-hmm.
also might be, more than that. And when are seeds being planted, and when is it, um, becoming a problem that's
Yeah.
identifiable?
Yeah. I think especially as a kid and now having kids and talking about this more, kids are so selfish, right? Like there's, and I don't mean that as we have come to mean it as a negative thing, but like they just only know their own perspective. So a coach might be innocently saying something or not realizing the impact of a simple comment that's not even directed at that kid, but kids just see everything from their own world. They see everything from their own eyes. They internalize it to mean, what does that mean for me?
Yes, you bring up a great point. It's that internalization, and there's that, they can't separate. So that must mean I'm bad. That must mean I'm
Right,
wrong. I like you
right.
were looking around going, how many carrot sticks should I have? That
Mm-hmm.
what is here for me and what I would know to consume, it might be wrong.
Yeah. Because, and the other thing, I mean, I'm just now obviously picturing myself sitting at that table, and I, I've always had, you know, I'm hesitating because I'm deciding how specific I want to be, but my mom is tiny.
Mhm,
Growing up, my best friend was tiny. She still is. I
mhm,
mean,
mhm,
and I can recall so clearly times in my life now when I look at a picture of, say, me and that friend, and I can recall looking at, like, by looking at that picture and going, gosh, I felt so fat. And looking at it now, being like, you're insane. First of all, you were a child.
yes,
Second of all, there is not an ounce of body fat on your skinny butt. Like, what are you talking about? But it was just because I was just in a bigger body. I wasn't fat, but I internalized it as fat. Like
mhm,
it's wild to me that at such a young age, and just as a disclaimer and like a thing, because I'm sure they'll listen, it's not anything my mom or my best friend were doing or saying to me that made me feel that way in comparison to them. What I'm getting at is that from a young age, I am comparing my body,
yep,
and I mean, I think kind of comparison is always natural in a sense, but I was just comparing it and going, assuming mine was the bad one.
yeah. And
Yeah, no,
that's what I think
that
most
sucks.
comparison is, yeah, where we end
Yeah,
up
yeah, you're right.
on the negative end of the evaluation there. And I think, you bring up an important point is there is research that shows that kids as young as preschool know the word fat, and they know it's a quote unquote bad word. And that's where we get that like fat phobia from a society is filtering down to us in this, individual messaging. And
Mm-hmm.
then we are, turning that on ourselves. And it's insane when you look back and go, wait a minute, oh my gosh, I had no sense of myself, because clearly I was just, making this comparison. And of course I was coming out, bigger, aka, worse off or whatever. And it's sad
Yeah,
when you look back
it's
and go,
sad.
oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it is. It's sad, and I can remember my mom even saying to me, like, "You're not fat. Like, I don't, And
Mhm.
I just wouldn't. I wouldn't have it. I wouldn't see it. I wouldn't hear it. It just was what it was. And I'm very conscious of that now in my house because I'm not I'm not at a place yet where I don't feel fat and I don't consider myself fat, but I'm very aware of not speaking about it, particularly in front of my kids. My husband, that's another story. But my kids won't hear me say it, won't hear me talk about it, won't see me look in the mirror and sigh. Like, nah, none of that.
Mhm.
It's
It is.
hard though.
It is, and you look back and go, oh gosh, from a very young age, I internalized the word fat and my body is fat as a bad thing. And then at some point, around the age of 8, it progressed into here's how I feel about my body. And then what does that mean about what I eat or what I don't eat or how much I eat or how much I don't eat?
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Mm-hmm.
when that's really sticks with us.
Yeah. So, the clients that you work with,
Mhm.
what does the process look like? Like, give us an idea of how you help people and what does that entail?
Mhm. So, as a dietitian, most people that I work with, they come to me and they feel so out of touch with what their body needs to eat. And
Mm-hmm.
what does that even look like? Or I'm obsessed with food. I think about it all the time. Some people find, oh my gosh, I'm always overeating, or I'm always feeling guilty about what I'm eating, or gosh, I can't eat. I can't go out to dinner without feeling like I have to exercise to make up for that, or feel okay about it without terrible guilt all night long. And so everyone needs kind of a place to start. And this whole process, as you have noticed when you cracked open Intuitive Eating 100 pages in, is incredibly daunting. And so
Yeah.
when I'm working with people, what I mean by as the dietitian is I bring that biological information to the table. So I might say something like, okay, so you can't stop eating the goldfish after your kids go to bed and you're frustrated by that and you don't understand why you're doing that. So it may be habitual, there may be deprivation going on. This may be your time to unwind and relax, but also I should tell you that I don't think you're eating enough for breakfast. So the biological being hungry after your kids go to bed can come in and marry itself with this is my time to unwind and do whatever
Mm-hmm.
I want.
Treat myself.
Yes, and they come together. So oftentimes I'm working with people on, ooh, this is interesting. What happened when you added some eggs or you added chia seeds to your breakfast? How did that impact your lunch? What happened when you turn your salad into a sandwich at lunch? Oh, interesting. You weren't craving sweets in the afternoon. Again, not that there's anything wrong with doing that, like we've talked about, and it sounds like you've talked about on the podcast before. Intuitive eating, there is a moral neutrality towards food, but what I like to help people do is figure out what you're dealing with. So if you think that you have a problem with sweets or you can't be controlled around your kids' snacks after they go to bed, then I think it's important for you to know that part of that may be from not eating enough, whether it's a specific nutrient or whether that's overall. And most people find it hard to believe that they may
Mm-hmm.
not be eating enough at certain times. So oftentimes we're kind of looking at this overall pathway of what happens on Monday, what happens on Thursday, what happens on Saturday, what happens after 8 p.m., and trying to create more consistency with your eating patterns. Again, it's like going back to what I learned in school and kind of paying that forward of, you know what, I would have never known that you could have avocado on 2 pieces of toast and 2 eggs, and that could have been a breakfast. That's not too much. And so when you feel like you're eating too much later on, then perhaps you weren't eating enough earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really what I try to, kind of roll my sleeves up when I'm early on working with people of did you know based on your energy needs that I calculated for you that this is so interesting. You could have been eating this much here. Your body could potentially deserve this much. And that may be part of why you're thinking about food because what does our body do when it wants to prompt us to eat something? It gets us thinking about food. So I try to separate out the physical and the mental when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to eating so that I can help people deal with the mental piece, usually with the help of me and maybe a trusted therapist if there's some deeper stuff there, especially if there's shame around the size and shape of our body. Um, how can we separate out that, developing more consistent eating patterns, eating enough, starting to challenge some of these foods that we felt so guilty eating? What does that do when it comes to our mindset and how we feel about eating? If you're able to eat a handful of potato chips with your lunch, turkey with a turkey wrap and avocado and cheese or something like that, then that's going to be a new experience that you have with potato chips rather than feeling like you're uncontrollably eating them when your husband's out of town.
I'm laughing because it's so relatable. It's just, yeah, you're talking to me and you're really talking to me.
Right? And that's how we know that it's dieting, it's not us. Because
Yeah.
I've, like, very fortunately just met you. And, I don't know, you haven't told me how you eat
Mhm.
or some of these things that you struggle with day to day, but I've talked to thousands of people,
Yeah.
and all this stuff is so similar, like, and it shows that it may manifest itself in unique or individual ways, but the overall process is the same. When we've gone through dieting, we are more interested in food. We may overeat certain things when given the opportunity. We're physically deprived. We start to think that a fat-free yogurt is a breakfast, and
Mm.
so it's like, figuring out this stuff. Just, there's so many things that can kind of correct themselves when you do.
Yeah. 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 I'm thinking of, within my first 100 pages here, what one of the things that really I resonated with was the pseudo dieting, and it sounds a lot like what you're talking about. Like, I'm not actively on a diet, but I behave and think around food in very diety ways. It's like I'm not following a specific diet plan. I'm not on Weight Watchers. I'm not doing any of that. But if I see a certain food, I have the thought, well, did I already have a lot of carbs today? Or, it's like I have these diety thoughts
Mhm.
and behaviors that run through my mind constantly.
Yeah, it's like the leftovers, like this,
Mm,
you went through, if it's almost like, if I were to ask somebody, like, what foods do you feel guilty eating, or what foods do you try and limit? I could guess you've done Whole30, low carb, South
mm,
Beach. We can figure out, where did these rules specifically come from, or, I'm following that specific diet plan, or, oh, when I eat carbs, I'm out of control around them, so I have to limit them, or I can only have them at certain times of day, or, like you said, so many servings a day of them.
mm-hmm,
And so, yeah, you end up with this repertoire of these thoughts that drive every single eating behavior and decision that you're making. So maybe you were going to order the buffalo chicken wrap when you were out to lunch, but then you noticed that the salmon salad was 120 calories less, and also, you should get salmon, it's healthier for you, and you need the vegetables, and then it'll fill you up. And it's like, that's where
yeah,
I think, I don't know if you've gotten to chapter 6 yet, but on satisfaction, there's this idea that, like, if we're eating what we enjoy, but also what physically can satisfy us. And a lot of other
mm-hmm,
cultures besides us value that a bit more. What does it mean to eat what you felt like eating, and also to eat enough of it? So if you're drawn to the buffalo chicken wrap, chances are you do need a bit of carb. There's a reason
mm,
that that's interesting to you on the
yeah,
menu. And then from a mental standpoint, if you eat what you really want, it's like that classic, like, well, I really wanted a chocolate chip cookie, so instead, I made myself eat some celery with some ranch, and then I had a rice cake with peanut butter on it. Then I had half of a banana, and then I had the cookie. It's like, let's cut
yeah,
all that out. Let's have what you
yeah.
actually wanted in the first
Right,
place.
right. I know. I'm struggling now with two things. One, the desire to still lose weight and be thinner while going through this. So obviously we've just said you don't know me very well. I'm about a year and a half postpartum with my second, and I'm yeah, I'm 25 pounds heavier than I've ever been in my entire life, and I've been this way since the day I walked out of the hospital. And I'm way more, I don't know what the right words are yet, but like my instinct is to say I'm way more comfortable in this body with the help of therapy, with the help of, your colleagues that I've talked to. That I went from when we first started kind of coming out of quarantine, I was having like anxiety attacks in the car, not wanting to be around people, to more recently going on a bachelorette party, like wearing clothes that fit and feeling like I'm not thrilled, but I'm here and I'm good, you know? And so that line between wanting a healthy relationship with food, wanting the relief and the freedom and all of the peace that will come hopefully by the end of this darn book, but also still feeling like I want to be thinner. It's I'm having a hard time with that.
It is. And I think that that desire to lose weight, like if anyone listening to this, um, maybe insisted that they've never had that or they don't have that, they might be either they've done a lot of work already
Mhm.
or they've somehow, gotten through this culture unscathed. But it's totally natural to have those pulls. And I think the goal when we're working through our relationship to food and this idea of deprivation, and by deprivation I mean something that is taken away. We respond differently when we really weren't ever allowed to do it. It's like that classic, like you said, your mom was a bit self-conscious growing up, and or health conscious, I mean, growing up. And so you might have been, while that was great and you probably got fiber and Wheaties and all of that good stuff, you might have been at your friend's house who had, you know, cheer Lucky Charms or something like that, and felt like, oh my gosh, I want those and I want the biggest bowl. And and your friend might have been only half interested in them and
Mhm.
not quite understand that. And so that's what I mean by deprivation, is like this idea of something that we don't get very often, or it's really only available to us right now, and go ahead and get it while you can. So you can imagine how that would play out with food and eating. Even now, is that kind of like pseudo dieting, like you said. So it's, starting to take a look at when I have a desire to lose weight, and um, that can take away your permission to eat these things, all the extras, quote unquote, all the carbs. It like reactivates your food rules, and you feel that sense of deprivation again. And so I think this process just takes a lot of checking in with yourself of like, oh my gosh, why did I feel so guilty that I did order the buffalo chicken wrap? I was just listening to myself. That dietitian that I talked to, she told me that meant that I probably needed some carbs. And then it's like, oh shoot, because I felt like when I put those jeans on to go out to dinner that they were too tight and I was feeling so uncomfortable and this intense desire to lose weight. So my permission to eat what sounded good to me kind of flew out the window. And
Mhm.
that's going to keep happening in this process. I think we hope that it's going to be this dramatic declaration of like, I know I can eat whatever I want, and then I can, and I mean that's not intuitive eating. I'm oversimplifying it, of course, but like I think that's a common stereotype of intuitive eating,
Yes.
really, to be more accurate. But I think we just kind of like rip the band-aid off and we have freedom and then we can just move through this process seamlessly. But really it's this renegotiation, it's this checking in, it's like you said, it's like identifying like, oh, pseudo dieting has been present here.
Yeah.
But if we can work with that desire to lose weight, it it will continue to come up, you know?
Yeah. 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 The other thing that I've identified and presents a problem for me is that I am certainly the unconscious eater. I am the sometime like I never almost never eat without doing something else. And the words from the book were paired with another activity to be productive. Like if that's not me to a T, I don't know what is. And oftentimes I can also be the chaotic unconscious eater of just eating on the go. And this is this is hard. Like I am a mom. I've got two little kids. I can't eat without them wanting to be on top of me. So tend to eat when they're not around. But when they're not around, I also want to do everything else I can't do when they're not around. And like I hate meal prepping. I hate the whole thing. So I just end up eating whatever's quick, whatever's around, and I'm usually prepping for an interview while I'm doing it, or I'm just like sitting down and having some hummus and veggie chips right before I jump on Skype. Like what do we do? Like what do I do? How do I how help me?
Well, and you're right about like these seasons of life, where it's almost
mm,
like it makes me think of like because it doesn't mean we need to like have a tablecloth and a candle burning every time we eat and, say
Yeah.
the prayers or whatever you might be doing, because the image is hilarious to think of your kids coming into the scene.
Ugh.
um and but then I have clients that are like, well, I eat staring into the fridge, and then I wake up and realize, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I've eaten. And I don't mean wake up
Mm.
figuratively, like, they're not sleepwalking eating, but
Right.
just this kind of like, oh shoot. So it's like, I think it's a kind of like, how do we do it where, like, I was talking to a client of mine recently who is a mom, and so what we were talking about is that for her, she has a peaceful lunch when her children are at school. And then when they come home for snack, she eats with them. And like, if they're having little kid Cliff Bars, she's also offering like veggies and fruit and whatever. And so she's like munching with them and just trying to like pay attention and be present, like in her body. But I think what happens in kind of what you're describing is you're getting overly hungry. And then by the time it's time to eat, you're like, oh my God, I can't even think straight about any of this.
Like 1,000%.
You
I'm
know?
and I'm not eating enough. I can tell you that because by the
Exactly.
end of the day, the end of the night when they go to sleep, it's like it's game time. Like I want to eat dinner, I want to have a snack, like I want to, and it's also that like this is my time thing. But then what happens is it's like the what I wanted to say was I know I shouldn't do that. So then I'm fighting myself the whole night. I'm like, don't snack, don't snack, don't have more. It's late. It's late. It's late. Oh, you know what? I want a glass of wine, so don't eat anymore
Mhm.
because you want 100 calories worth of wine. Like it's it's exhausting.
It is. And even as you're saying that to me, I'm thinking my brain would say, don't tell me what to do. I'm gonna have one. I'm gonna have more. It's
Yeah.
like that kind of, I think it can kind of bring out that like rebellion where we're trying to tell ourselves what to eat or what not to eat and police ourselves. And it's so irritating. It's like, shut up, all of this stuff, stop. And I think
Yes.
there's no like perfect way to go about it. I mean, the very reality of your schedule right now might be that, like, yeah, there's a majority of what I eat happens after my kids go to bed, or snacks happen,
Mm-hmm.
during nap time, or I have to eat now because when they get home or when I'm in charge of them, it's going to be chaos. And so I think then comes the practical eating part. That's where
Mm-hmm.
that shows up. So like if I'm working with somebody, for example, who, like, one of my clients, she's a lawyer, and so she's often doing like litigation stuff in the morning. She's in court. She's not gonna pop open a bar or a banana and like while she's talking to somebody, and like that's probably not allowed, even
Whip
if
up some eggs,
yeah,
avo
exactly.
toast, whatever.
Exactly. So, for her, but she's always not really hungry yet, right when she wakes up either, because she's going into work, she's going into court, and she's getting right to it. But she was finding, like you're describing at night, her lunchtime was like a free for all. And she didn't like it because it was uncomfortable, because she was so hungry, because she had gone so long without eating and not eating enough, that she's like, she can't stop. And then it continues on in the night and later on. So for her, what we ended up doing is kind of establishing this like series of practical eating where it was like, okay, you can still do easy, because really, how much time and energy do you have to put into cooking? Like, is it going to be things that are quick and easy and like accepting that season of your life? You're not going to be making your own barbecue sauce. You're going to be throwing something in a crock pot and like moving on with your day. And it's probably going to be something super simple and super easy and something that your kids also like or whatever. So, it's kind of thinking about the time and energy of available to this. And then, can that like, but like you said, I was talking about like naming it. So if it's like I'm eating quote unquote all this at night
Mm-hmm.
because I'm on a regular basis not eating enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
my energy is chaotic, my schedule is chaotic. And so then I think there's this, like, again, naming it. It's not me. It's my response at night to not eating enough, to having a
Mm-hmm.
chaotic eating schedule. But does that mean that you need to eat at 8, 10, whatever, and it's the perfect same thing every single day? Like you said, meal prep isn't either. You don't want to
Yeah.
spend all day Sunday, cutting carrots and having microwaved asparagus on Thursday from
Oh
Sunday,
my god, no. Oh my
and
god, no.
yeah, and so like, what does that middle look like? Is it
Yeah.
something like super easy sandwiches that you keep stocked around, or is it, having, like you said, like having veggie tips and hummus and just kind of knowing that that's an option for you, or yogurts or cottage cheese or fruits, energy bars, kind of like you would with your kids. You're like, oh, you're going to be at school, so here are all of these things. Like, take a bar, you have a sandwich in there, you have a yogurt, you have a cheese stick, you have a whatever. And so it's like, how do we do the same thing for ourselves, knowing that, hey, no matter what, whether you want to deal with it or not, you're going to be hungry in 3 hours. It's going to happen. It's coming. So let's go ahead
I
and like
am.
think about it.
No.
We think better when we're not in that panic mode, but at the same time making sure we're not like, again, holding ourselves to like some sort of standard of rigidity and perfection,
Yeah.
um but trying to get out ahead of it a little bit.
Yeah. 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 It all makes sense. You know, I'm just tired.
Yeah,
I'm just tired. Like, I just don't even want to care. I don't. And then
absolutely.
it's just, I don't want to care about it. But I have to because you just told me that I have to eat no matter what.
You or your body biology is
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
make
my
it
biology.
non-negotiable.
My biology. Ugh. So you mentioned a while back, and I made a note of it. Oh, one thing I did just want to mention about that before I go there is it's so wild to me that what I'm doing now, the way I'm existing, actually feels out of control. Like it feels because I'm like I have one side of my brain in like diet culture and like diet mentality, and then the other side of my brain is like I'm too tired to care about diet culture or nutrition or anything. So I'm like just totally out of control. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything more to say about that, but you did mention you mentioned a stereotype of intuitive eating. Are there other things that you wish people knew about this way of being, this lifestyle, this I hate even saying a lifestyle, but you know what I'm saying. Are there other
Yeah,
misconceptions, stigmas, things you wish people knew?
I would say, one of the biggest one is, yeah, it just means eat whatever you want. Another thing I think is I've noticed intuitive eating being co-opted as a day of not tracking. Like let's say you are on a diet or something like that, and you're working with a trainer that has you quote unquote take a day off from your diet, twice a week or something like that. And it's like that's not intuitive eating. Like it's not just this like blanket term for like not tracking or eating something specific. So like just the intuitive eating is like again a research validated, very comprehensive approach to getting back to a more innate place of eating where
Mm-hmm.
you're able to discern, how much do I need to eat? What does this look like for me? How do I know when I'm hungry? How do I know when I'm full? What happens to me when I realize that I'm labeling foods as good or bad? What happens to me when I exercise only for aesthetic purposes? Am I avoiding exercise? Am I overdoing it with exercise? What does movement mean to me? Can you be joyful in your body? How do you respect your body even if you don't like how it looks? How do you take care of yourself? So we're kind of dipping into all of these as we talk. Like when I'm describing that, like thinking about what you're going to have, having snacks present, giving some thought to meals, some of that is body respect. Like no matter what, your body is going to let you know that it needs to eat. And we might as well expect that that's going to happen by honoring your hunger, trying to tune into your fullness. And I think that's like a huge thing, is that it's not just whether or not, not giving a crap about health or whatever. It's emotion or intuitive eaters are shown to have lower um, LDL numbers, which is like a more like harmful type of cholesterol reading, lower stress levels, higher quality of life, and a lot of people that I work with, it like ripples out into other areas. They're like, when I started listening to myself, I also started establishing boundaries at work. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting
Mm-hmm.
just how really respecting your body and your biological needs and your mental satisfaction and pleasure, it goes a long way. So I think those are, in my opinion, what I've seen, it being promoted as like the anti-health diet or the eat whatever you want or taking a day off from tracking a sort of specific diet. Yeah, those are the biggest things, because it can't be, as much as social media is amazing, it is the amount of awareness that is brought to intuitive eating is so inspiring and exciting to me. uh, but you can't learn about intuitive eating, as you found 100 pages into the book, simply through social media posts. And so I think
Right.
that's where it ends up becoming these sound bites for people. And they
Yeah.
say, oh, wait, I don't understand that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we just have to go a little deeper into it if we want to.
Yeah. And I think that when you hear intuitive eating, I mean, in such a wonderful way, these are not complicated words, but I think it allows people to assume they know what it means and assume they might be doing it or not doing it already.
Yep.
Um, and here I am having this conversation with you. As I've mentioned, I had a conversation with Caitlin Parsons and a few other of your colleagues, and yeah, there's so much. I just would encourage anyone listening who's heard anything today that sounds reasonable to them or sounds like them, to just get the book, because
Yeah.
I think there's certain things that are going to resonate with me that might not resonate for you or anyone else. And so like the I guess what I'm also saying is that it's hard for someone like yourself to come on here and do a generic interview and really get into it because it's so specific to the person and what
Oh,
they're
yeah.
struggling with and what they need to do and all of that.
Absolutely. And I think, to finish that thought, anyone that's listening and hearing us talk about intuitive eating, it is it is for anyone who needs it, and there's no shame in having been inundated in diet culture or whatever you have
Mm.
done to be here. I've had clients that I've talked to that are like, I hear you, Erica. But I'm the same weight that I was when I was depressed in college, and I just really can't be okay with that. It's like, of course, you don't have to be at all. Or, I hear you that, I should be able to keep potato chips in my house or not feel out of control around them at party. But, when I was younger, my dad and I used to share potato chips, and I don't have him in my life anymore. And so sometimes I
Mm.
think when I eat those on the weekends, it's because I miss him. It's like you said, food is so
Yeah.
deep. It is
Yeah, it is.
biological, it is psychological. Our relationship to our bodies is so incredibly personal and associated with so many formative experiences in our life. And I think that's where, like, the social media or reading the book, or also intuitiveeating.org, they have a list of all people who are certified in intuitive eating, different types of healing professionals. Like Caitlin Parsons is a coach, or I'm a dietitian. There's therapists in there as well. And it's like, it is, if you have resistance to it, or you feel like not good enough hearing about intuitive eating, like, I'm passionate about it. I want everyone to have that kind of peace, but I know that the process getting there is not easy, or that it doesn't have to be for everyone. If
Hmm.
you find that there's other ways that you feel okay, then that's fine. There's no superiority that says this is the absolute path that you need to take. But if you are, at war with your body and food, then it could be something to really explore.
Yeah. And I think just from personal experience, like just slowing down enough to figure out whether you are or you aren't. Like, I think so many of us just eat or don't eat, or like just, I don't know, just we don't realize everything that you just said about how deep food really is. Um,
Yeah,
and it takes an initial level of awareness to even acknowledge that. It's
absolutely.
like it's not just food. It's emotional, it's biological, it's all the thing. It's yeah,
It's all the
it's a lot.
things. And everyone that I work with is brilliant, intelligent, insightful, intuitive in their own ways. And so
Mm.
it's cool that, in the beginning, we were talking about external and internal messages that we receive. And I think another way to put it, to round out what you just said, is like, a lot of diet plans or general nutrition advice, the same that I got in school, the same that I told people early in my career,
Mm.
it talks about what to eat and it talks about how much, but we never get into the why. We never get into the, where are you putting your energy in your life, what's important to you, and how much, like, in a more deep way of being connected to yourself. And those are the things, the why, the when, the where you're putting your energy, those drive the what and how much for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that if
Mm-hmm.
we can go deeper, then again, we can find a place of peace that feels more congruent with us. What if somebody said, "Oh, you can't drink coffee, it's not healthy for you," and you're like, "But I love coffee."
Right.
Can we work around this?
Yeah.
So I hope that
Yeah.
helps kind of like finish that piece that you were describing.
Yeah. Well, and the why, I think, is so critical, and this is what I got sort of really just angry about earlier in the conversation, but also I spoke with Dr. Conason, Alexis Conason, Diet Free Revolution, the
Mhm.
whole thing, and that conversation I think was opened my eyes to the fact that as women, as a society, the billions of dollar food and exercise and diet industry, they don't want us to ask why. Why doesn't matter. All that matters is that you fit the mold of thin, and that's going to get you where you need to go in life.
Yeah, and buy your next detox plan to make up for the one that you just did that quote unquote failed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wants to
Yeah.
keep us in the system.
It's infuriating.
Yeah.
So has anything about your work, either currently or to get you at this point, has anything like truly surprised you?
Hmm. Hmm. Gosh, I don't know. I would say, I mean, I think early on, and I referenced this a tad bit earlier, from what I learned in school, I assumed that everyone quote unquote overeats because that's what I
Mm.
taught. We eat too much, we don't move enough, etc. And I was
Mm-hmm.
surprised at how many people that I started counseling and working with were in fact not eating enough.
Yeah.
And that was, like I said, I found intuitive eating before I started working with people, but I think it took me a couple years to fully integrate my own experience into how I showed up with people. And
Mm-hmm.
so there was that element of, this is so interesting. I'm talking to so many people, and people are telling me they're eating once a day, or they're skipping lunch, or they never eat breakfast, and they don't understand why they can't lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was probably the biggest thing. I believed them. And then as I learned more about health at every size and set point weight theory and intuitive eating, it made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Everything made sense. And so at this point, I think the only thing that surprises me is how long it's still taking for medical model of healthcare to catch up. A lot of my clients are like, I'm bought into intuitive eating. I want to be healthier. This all makes sense to me. My health numbers are improving, but why do I have to get weighed at the doctor's office? Why do I not get that bonus in my insurance? Why am I labeled with this body mass index? And and so I think that's the part that's still confusing to people because it seems inconsistent with what we know in the research, and then letting the insurance, the medical model catch up, and that takes time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think just as being that person, it's confusing.
Hmm.
The mixed messages constantly,
Yeah.
love yourself, body positivity, and then your doctor is like, "Hey, according to this chart here,
Yes.
you're obese." Like, I think
Exactly.
I'm actually, according to BMI, I think I'm actually obese. And I
Hmm.
know that that's outrageous.
Yeah.
Like, it's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah.
But also, what comes to mind is like, I have like total fear of being labeled as that, you
Hmm.
know? Yeah.
Because we've been
No.
taught that that's a bad word. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, Erica, everything that we've talked about today, how do people, how do the people, I mean, me, potentially, how do we work with you? How do you work with people? Is it one on one? I know you do groups. Like,
Yes.
how do we get with you?
Yeah, I so I just my last group just finished this past week.
Mm,
So I think I'll be doing another group starting the beginning of 2022. I like to just run them periodically, and it's cool. They were a really great group, and I think there's power in that community, because you feel so alone doing this. And then I have other
mhm,
clients who want to work with me privately, and they're like, I had this experience, and I don't want to talk about it in front of other people just yet. And so I'd like to work with you in that way. And so anyone that's interested in that, if you're just interested in getting to know me a little bit, I do share quite a bit on my Instagram at Align Nutrition. I also have a podcast, the Align Nutrition Podcast, where I share a bit more.
mhm.
And as far as working with me, people can typically inquire directly through my website, and I have a lot of information on there. I have a wonderful client coordinator, and we can answer questions and see whether it's a good fit, and whether
Mhm.
you're in a place that, are you somebody that would be somebody that I could help, and what would
Yeah.
that look like? So that's the inquiry form is pretty extensive, so it'll become pretty clear.
No, that's good though. I mean,
Yeah.
because for both parties, right? You
Yep.
gotta. It's
Yep.
like finding a therapist. You gotta maybe shop around if you don't jive, or gotta be open to the process, right?
Absolutely. And I love working with people on these issues. And like I said in the beginning, kind of marrying that biological and that psychological. And for some people who've maybe done some therapy or worked on, and oh, I've worked on intuitive eating and I don't understand because I still feel out of control and whatever. So I'm the type of person that can help orient you and figure out, is there something in your biology that's impacting this piece? And how can we learn more about your body so that you can feel empowered? And
Mhm.
start to trust yourself a bit
Mhm.
more because you had a dietitian sign off on it. I know all the stuff, all
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
science,
yeah.
and so it's
No,
kind of
it's good.
fun to have somebody, yeah, take a look at how you're
Yeah.
eating, not completely unlike, you know, the shame that it might have felt to share a diet plan or feel like you're failing at something. We talk about the food, but it's all very additive.
Yeah. When you work with someone, typically how long are you working with them?
This process can take time. So I would say, I have clients that I've worked with for 6 months. I have clients I've worked with for 6 years, though we might see each
Mm.
other very infrequently at that point. As you can imagine listening to this, like, oh, I was doing great until I had to go on spring break with my sister-in-law. And turns out she just
Mm.
lost 30 pounds this year. And so, Erica, can I come and see you do a little tune-up session?
Yeah.
I kind of need a plan. So I would say on average, most people that I might work with would be anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, just depends. How I like to work with people is we would start out meeting like every other week and really developing a foundation and, kind of mapping all of these points out. And then we start to move further and further out because you're having more and more time every 3 weeks, once a month, so that you can start to get your footing under you and go
Mhm.
out in the world
Mhm.
and practice these things and mess up and come back. And then we figure out why things got messed up and what that even looks like. And,
Mhm.
I think the other thing I say about my process in Align Nutrition is teaching you how to become your own nutrition expert of your own
Mm.
body and of your own life. And so the way that I work with people mirrors that process of we start out working together more frequently and we move further and further apart because you're becoming the expert. You don't need me as much, but I'm still here for
Yeah.
support and I'm helping you figure out, what's next, and seeing the big picture of here's where you are in this process.
Yeah, I like that. It makes sense. It makes a lot
Mhm.
of sense. And yeah, going out into the world is a whole other ball game. It's tough. I was at a baby shower this weekend and they served cake and it was like, most of the women around me were like, "This is a really big slice. I don't know if I should." Da, 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 da. And I have enough awareness now to sit there and be like, I looked at it. I was like, "Do I want it or do I not?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I kind of want it." And you know what? It's okay. Like, I
Yeah.
don't need to have the whole outer discussion and pretend like I'm not going to eat it. I ate it. you know?
Exactly.
Like I just and I think you, even being only 100 pages in, it's like I'm like aware of things and I see things and I hear things that I can't unsee and I can't unhear, you know?
Mhm.
Anyway. All right. Well, Erica, is there anything that you want to that you would have asked yourself that I didn't, or that you want to really leave people with before we wrap up?
Gosh, I know. I think we covered everything that was coming to mind as we were talking through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I would say, what I said earlier in terms of leaving people with just this idea that it's not your fault that
Yeah.
you are here. We
Mm-hmm.
are taught these messages in a bigger society, in a bigger cultural setting, and we've internalized them. And diet culture does a good job of teaching us to blame ourselves for that. And so, hopefully, hearing this, you can unload some of that blame and start to get curious about your process and why you do things and where you're putting your energy and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's yes. Thank you for saying that,
Yeah.
because sometimes you just need to hear it for the 150th time, or you need to hear it a different way. So thank you. And thank you for your time. This was, like I said, felt like a therapy session for me, and I really appreciate it.
Wonderful talking with you.
Okay, so first and foremost, I absolutely loved Erica's examples. So relatable, so relevant. There were a few moments there that her examples hit a little too close to home, but that also tells me that I'm not alone in my struggles. It's funny because just this week, my husband asked me about how my eating habits had changed a bit. For example, he noticed that I'm recently throwing some croutons in a salad, or sometimes I'm even eating the salad with scoop chips instead of a fork. Completely inspired by Baked by Melissa. Check her out. Your life will never be the same. And I shared with him a bit about where I'm at with all of this, and I feel like I'm in some sort of testing phase. So, what I mean by that is that I've truly come over a big hump, which was literally me berating myself for sometimes hours or days on end for eating certain foods or meals or whatever. I just would talk so negatively to myself if I had a meal that wasn't quote unquote good, or ate too late, or ate too much, or whatever. And I really just don't do that so much anymore. But it's like I don't fully trust it yet. So, this is what I mean by testing. I'm like, hey, I wonder if I can eat this previously untouchable food and not berate myself. Let's find out. And so, using his examples, like croutons, I like them. I don't live and breathe by them, but they were something I never allowed myself to eat before. And the chips with the salad, I don't know, I just enjoy a salad much more when there's a crunch. Or another example that's coming to mind is how my breakfast for years has always been avocado toast. But I used to use those sandwich thins, and now I have really nice bread for my toast. And not only do I enjoy it so much more and look forward to it, but now I can go to a restaurant and see the bread basket and not feel emotional about it. For years, a bread basket was like torture. It was this push and pull of I want it, but I shouldn't have it. And oh my God, but it's so good. And when will I get this chance again? And now I can just look at it. And if I want it, I have it. And if I don't want it, I don't have it. And I just don't feel emotional about it. I still don't have all the most eloquent words to describe this. But the fact that there are boxes of cereal and loaves of French bread in my house and croutons, and I don't feel angst about it, and I don't feel like I have to finish it in one sitting, it's a big win and a big change. But I'm still stuck between this progress and the desire to lose weight. I'm enjoying this newfound freedom and this sort of lighter mentality towards food. It's nice not berating myself. But I don't really know how it's going to play out, honestly. I'm continuing to talk about it in therapy, and I'm going to reach out to more experts like Erica who can continue to provide clarity and insight along the way. And I'll just say this, that if you've been on this journey with me or you're thinking about starting, it really is one of those things that takes time. And I know that's so annoying to hear, but I wanted to read the intuitive eating book, and I wanted to interview these women and have something just click. And it's it's one of those things that some things have clicked, but it wasn't like a light switch, you know? And I want to give some context that I started interviewing, this group of women in the summer of 2021, and I'm recording this now in February of 2022. So, although we might be listening to these episodes, one after another, this work and sort of these one or two big wins for me have taken half a year. So it's frustrating, but it is worth it. And so that's what I'm just trying to tell myself now is that stay the course, stay the course. All right. Anyway, thank you, Erica, so, so much. And thank you for listening. Catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.